Today we have Dr. Lynne Hughes, who teaches in the area of orthopedics, manual therapy, physical aids, and healthcare issues. Prior to coming to San Antonio, Ms. Hughes held instructor positions at Angelo State University, and at Lynn Community College Physical Therapy Assistant Program in Waco, and the Texas Women's University in Dallas, Texas. Ms. Hughes has worked 15 years at Scott and White Hospital in Temple and the Scott and White Sports Therapy Rehab Clinic in Hewitt, Texas. She practices in acute care, wound care, rehabilitation, outpatient, skilled nursing, and home health, while developing protocols for staff education and development for back schools and sports clinics. Today she's going to give us a great presentation on why my aging patients do not do what I tell them. Why don't they do that? So, and just to prove their adherence. So please help me in welcoming Dr. Lynne.
Thank you. Actually, I shouldn't cast out parents because they usually fall in that same aging category. It should be parents and patients. Ironically, parents is kind of what motivated my study for my PhD. So my PhD is in health promotion and wellness, and both of my parents are diabetic. So why won't they do what I was telling them to do? It was actually what motivated me to go on and study. So I'm hoping to give you some little pearls and resources that you can use today. But first I want to get an idea of what kind of things you have trouble getting your patients to do, or your parents to do. Get your meditations huge. Actually, just write it in the entire box and you say, I put it over there to check this, scroll them all down in front of you.
Behavioral changes, stop smoking, lose weight, all of those are really
Exercise
hard.
regularly.
Exercise regularly.
Excellent.
I can't make myself change. I've been trying really hard.
It's true.
I just can't do it.
So those lifestyle,
The life-
and I call them habits, lifestyle habits, because habits are always harder to break. Once they're part of your pattern of what you do day in and day out. So even little things, like I see some of you are like me and like to cross your legs when you sit. So if I told you, you can't cross your legs anymore, for the rest of this presentation you have to keep your legs uncrossed. What happens to your thoughts already?
Are you crazy?
Exactly.
I've been crossing my legs all my life and it's been fun.
You're helping that way. But that's exactly what any of our reactions to somebody telling us you can't have Cokes anymore because you're diabetic, or you have to exercise every day because you've got a bad heart now. The human reaction to that is, what are you talking about? I want to do that. I love my Cokes, right? Okay, so I'm going to hopefully end up with kind of 3 rules for you guys. So the video is the introduction to the first rule.
The next one's the full view.
One more. Oh, is that the one where we're riding bicycles?
No, this is when they turn into.
make it fun. The hard thing about make it fun is how do you know what's fun? So we're going to get to that. So we've kind of talked about some of the issues, some of the most documented research out there is on medication adherence, and it ranges anywhere from 40% to 75% on adherence rates, probably closer to 40% in my experience. Because my area of study was diabetes, a lot of my resources are relevant to diabetes, but it's relevant to all of you too, being here in San Antonio, so hopefully you don't mind a lot of references to diabetes in here. But lifestyle modifications, particularly those persons with diabetes, it runs about 20 to 50% on changing those lifestyle habits. Okay, so we know that tailoring helps. If you can make it to the individual, if you can include considerations for culture, matching it to their readiness to change, using the friends that are the model of change. This is a new technique. It hasn't been used with behavior change very much except in substance abuse. So a lot of our behavior change things come out of substance abuse world, right? A lot of the originations of techniques come out of there. So cognitive mapping is one that is used in substance abuse and has not been used a lot with chronic diseases. But for my dissertation work, that's what I decided to try and do, is look at cognitive mapping in people with diabetes. So I literally found 16 people that have been newly diagnosed with diabetes. And so that ranged from the day after they had been told they were diabetic to as much as 3 weeks. But one of the conditions was is they could have no formal diabetes training before I got to talk to them. So nobody was telling them what to think other than maybe family or friends. So no health professional was feeding them information before I got to them. And I asked them one question. When you think of living with diabetes, what comes to mind? And I literally handed them a stack of Post-it notes and asked them to write words or phrases that came to mind. Even if it didn't seem to be relevant, if it came to their mind, I wanted them to write it down. So then after they got their stack, I asked them to arrange it out on a poster board. And they could arrange it any way they wanted to. They could circle them, they could group them, they could draw lines or arrows between them to show relationships between the things. They didn't have to do it in any certain pattern. When they got done with their poster board, I asked them to tell me the story behind their poster board. And then I only asked clarifying questions. What do you mean by that? Or tell me more about that, so that I wasn't, again, feeding them any information. It was just getting information from them. And once I had them do that, I put it in as a computerized version, trying to copy the format as closely as I could. And I analyzed all of these maps. So I interviewed them at that initial reaction stage, and I interviewed them 6 months later. And I kind of had a significant unintentional finding, and I find it very interesting. I hope you do too. And of course, this is only one study, so you have to take it a critical look at this information, but I think it's pretty interesting, because they ended up dividing, and I didn't expect this, because I was in San Angelo at the time, and they have free diabetes education programs, and I thought everybody would get the diabetes education program. If they weren't set up for it, I gave them information how to get into it. But it ended up basically that 7 people had a formal diabetes education program and 9 did not, which gave me a nice division in my subjects there. And just kind of the hard data things, BMI, almost everybody dropped on their BMI. I think there were 2 that did not. One stopped exercising because of an injury, And the other one was actually diagnosed in the ER with diabetes and had lost a great deal of weight prior to his diagnosis. So that's my speculation of why he gained a little weight. This is their A1Cs. So the first line is their initial, the second is their 6 month. The blue is because those were fasting blood sugars and not A1Cs that they were diagnosed with. And only one person did not have a follow-up A1C. But you can see almost everybody dropped on their A1Cs, regardless of class or not. So I found that really interesting. Kind of give you an idea, this is an initial map, and this was the person that I felt like had the greatest change. And you can see this person talked a lot about things that they're going to have to do. Remember their meds, they're going to have to go to the doctor, they're scared, they've got to get more rest. I'm sorry, that was...
You had that scared tied into insulin.
They did that.
They did that.
They did that.
So they were afraid of being insulin.
Yes, they're afraid of being on insulin and taking insulin. So I did a qualitative analysis of all this, so I broke them down, and the categories are the information most collapsed. So it broke down into these categories. And again, I thought this was really interesting that 71 of the Post-it notes were about things that they needed to do with no cueing from anybody. And things that they had to do that were more medical management, so I have to take medicines, I have to do shots. They came up with those things as well. And you see that they just had concerns. Those ranged usually with a lot of family concerns. I'm not going to be able to provide for my family. I'm going to have to cook 2 meals now because I've got to eat differently than my kids. My kids aren't going to want to eat it. Those kinds of things. Then they just feel bad that they're sick.
Can you give us ages and genders?
The
Your 16
median age was 45.
Okay.
They were more female than male. I think it was 9 to 7. There weren't any significant differences in age, groups, or gender. And that was contradictory to some of the research. Some of the research says the gender makes a difference.
But your group is very small, so that's probably
Yes.
kind of something.
Yep. So some of the examples of things that they said they needed to do were eating fruits and vegetables, watching what I eat. Some of their concerns. That they feel bad. They didn't want diabetes. They were very honest. There was an expression of loss. And things that they can't do, the nose, they identified those as well. And fears. Medical management type things. And they even came up with a few coping strategies on their own. Okay, so this was my darkest subject. He started out, there's anger, resentment. He's got to change, he's got to do the shots, it's no fun. All the things he can't have, he's going to have to do. A lot of anxiety expressed there. After 6 months, this was his map.
And he chooses where he posts it.
Yes. So another one, this happened to be the fellow that was diagnosed in the ER. So he was well into the 600s on his blood sugar on admission. So absolutely uncontrolled. And this is his after 6 months.
Both of those were without the education.
The first one was the one person that had a personal physician that was, his personal physician was also a personal friend and gave him some education. This person did not have the education. So at 6 months, I re-interviewed them and again analyzed the data. The concepts is just looking at the Post-it notes themselves, basically finding common words. So eating would all be grouped as one concept. So these 59 concepts disappeared from what they were saying. So I thought it was kind of interesting that a lot of the negative emotions were gone: mad, angered, sad.
Dr. Pepper and Coke. There's Coke Zero.
So to kind of make it easy to compare, these were the clusters that had the greatest change from the initial to the 6 months. So initially they were more worried about the things that they had to take care of, watching what they were doing, and I'm going to have to do more of these things. That dropped down at 6 months. The negative emotions dropped. What I'm going to have to change and plan to do dropped. The number of things that they can't have, the nose, no sugar, no chocolate, things dropped. The questions, why did this happen to me? What am I going to do? Those disappeared. The watch and scrutiny, everybody's going to be watching what I eat. I can't go to the social and eat at the church because they're going to be watching and tell me I can't have those kind of things disappear. They talked more about that they were monitoring their blood sugar, that they can handle this, the positive emotions started coming out, and I can do this was a thing that was new at 6 months. So again, the thing I found really interesting about this is when I looked at the two groups that did and did not have the diabetes education, there were no significant differences in their concepts in the clusters that they talked about. So, my take-home message from that is consider that possibly your patients already can self-identify what they need to do and what's going to be easiest for them to do to modify their lifestyle when they're given a diagnosis like diabetes. And that our traditional biomedical model and style of counseling should start off with some questions rather than just education. And then let you use those questions to lead your education. Because one of my fellows was a construction worker, and his was the Dr. Pepper, and he'd go to the Town and Country gas station and fill up his supersized mug 4 and 5 times a day with Dr. Pepper. Well, he knew before anybody told him that he had to cut out his Dr. Pepper. But it's always more successful if it's their choice to cut out Dr. Pepper than if they're told to cut out Dr. Pepper. So, I did not use motivational interviewing in my study. I didn't lead them at all, other than to tell them, you can go to your diabetes education now, and if they didn't have it set up, to give them the number to call for the free diabetes education. But another technique that that I've been trained in is motivational interviewing. And I think you could link these two things very easily. And, you know, you might not have time to sit down and have your patient fill out a bunch of Post-it notes and ask them about it and get their full story, though that ranged from 5 minutes to, I had one lady take about 55 minutes to complete her interview. my voice recorder ran out of hard drive before she finished talking, but on average, people were really pretty efficient with doing that. And actually, I think you could even narrow that down to maybe even their first 3 or 5 thoughts. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Because usually one of those, when I looked at it, is usually the emotional component. So something about the fear or concerns. One was usually food, and one was usually what they needed to do. So in those first 3, they usually came to what they needed to do.
I also think it's very important with our new fellows to realize that when you did the exercise with your patients, I said, what if she would have asked me as a physician? What are your thoughts when you are delivering for the first time the results to the patient? What are your concerns? And no research on this, but we physicians are heavily, and I thought about me, dead end complications. Your cohort, it was one of the minimal pieces. Mm-hmm. So I really believe that is very powerful what you're saying, and we train our residents in family medicine and motivational interview. We can have different languages. So we don't know where the patient's priorities are and what are their fears or strengths, and we're just so focused and, well, we need to treat your complications or you're going to, in 10 years, 15 years, being blind and deaf. They don't see that. So I think as a practitioner, as a clinician, because we don't only have MDs here, that is a powerful tool, If you would map their providers with the same exercise, it will be a fascinating example of how we are not communicating. We are focusing into 2 different things, and maybe that explains why they don't comply with it, because we're so focused on what we think as doctors is what will be beneficial for them.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, in San Antonio, you started talking about medical homes now.
Patient-centered medical homes.
Yeah. How do you have something concrete to know that you're influencing your whole medical home? And I think cognitive mapping might have a position there, a tool to say, hey, this is what their map looked like before they've gone to this education or participated in this program, and this is what their lab is saying now, and this is what their new map is saying now. It's a qualitative measure, but it is something that you can see a difference in.
Sure.
Very good. So nice segue into the motivational interviewing. This technique grew out of the substance abuse world too. There are tons of courses on motivational interviewing, and there's videos online. If anybody's interested in my reference list, I've got a few of the printed copies, and but motivationalinterviewing.org. You can go on there and see samples of their training. I've simplified it drastically for our presentation, but I think you can sometimes take little jewels out of a big concept like this and use it in everyday life in the clinic. So here's some examples of kind of open-ended questions that you might ask to elicit the same kind of information that I got out of the cognitive map. So if you know somebody needs to exercise or they need to take their medications, and you're going to be impacting their lifestyle, you can say, what about taking these medications concerns you? And it may even change your your recommendation, because if they say, I just cannot take medicines 3 times a day, I always forget it at lunch, well, maybe you'll change your dosage. So, sometimes just a single question can make a difference. So, if they say, gosh, I need to change and not drink that Dr. Pepper from Town and Country 5 times a day, then you say, well, what about drinking that Dr. Pepper concerns you, or what's a problem, or what barriers do you see to stopping that behavior? And,
In tobacco, when I did tobacco for many years, I was trained in a model where the first question was, tell me why you like to smoke. So instead of starting with, what are you concerned about, the patient is much more eager to say, wow, she's not going to tell me. So they start opening up, and then you move them to the next, and then you help them to see the ambivalence. Well, I really love it because it calms my nerves, but híjole, you know, my grandkid is smoking with me, or, you know, so, and then they start figuring out their way. But I love that because it really helped me to see behaviors in a different way. You know, what do you like about, you know, eating, you know, 5 flour tortillas versus 1 flour tortilla, you know, and they tell you why they love 5 flour tortillas, 5 tacos, 5.
one of my subjects was very upset because she was Hispanic, and her physician was telling her specifically, you can't have flour tortillas anymore. Well, it upset her because she didn't eat flour tortillas. And she was like, I don't eat flour tortillas, I don't want flour tortillas, I mean, just assuming and telling me I can't have flour tortillas.
Wow.
And so, yeah, again, very important to find out what the issues are before.
Yeah, you're Hispanic, doesn't mean like you eat spicy food. I get it all the time being Colombian. Oh, you don't eat spicy food? No, we it's not like Mexican Americans. Oh, you're Hispanic. So again, the stereotypes and these kind of things. Good reminder.
So we can get past all those biases and cultural differences just by asking the patient to direct what they do. Okay. Can you guys think of any other questions? Sounds like you've had the training already.
Yeah, tiny little training. I like this stuff too.
The question which I would ask is like, on a scale of 0 to 10, how motivated are you? And let the patient tell me first, and most of the patients won't pick 0. They'll pick either 2, 3, or 4, or something like that. And then I'll say, why did you decide to pick 3 or 4 and not 0? So that means there is something which you have in mind is not right. Then the patient will say, yeah, because I think maybe this thing is not right to do, maybe smoking is not good for me. Then I would let the patient talk that smoking is bad because the patient admits now that there's something bad about it, and then go from there. And then ask the next question would be, what would take you to come from a 3 or 4 to say a 6? And let them talk about it, and then gradually, you know, incline them towards to quit smoking. So, and that model has worked pretty much for me.
That's a very good one.
That's a good one.
When I think of exercise, I always try to ask patients, how do you think you can work this into your day? So find out their thoughts on what they think they can do next to make it work into their day. Because if it's not going to work into their day, they won't do it.
Exactly.
And that's very similar to if you decide to change. What do you think would work for you? And yeah, if they've identified, oh, I'm going to have to exercise. Well, if you need to exercise, what kind of exercise would you like to do? What would you pick?
If it's a new patient, I'll ask them, what is your worst fear about diabetes? If it's a return patient, I'll say, what is the hardest thing for you to do right now? And have them start there.
Good techniques. just a couple others, kind of going back, what are the benefits, what concerns you, what are the most important reasons to change? Those kind of go back to the using the scale, very similar. So what you hope to get the patient to do is to come up with some change talk. You may even pick up on them saying some of these things in your conversation. So, you know, if I keep eating like this, I know I'm going to die. I need to quit smoking. If they express a desire, that they are more likely to follow through than if they don't express any kind of desire. So this is an expression of desire by saying I need to, or if I don't, I'm going to have consequences. What you want to do is get them to take one more step before they leave your office and go to, at least I might change, or I will change, or I'm going to do this. So this is something I learned really early in my career working with teenage athletes, because they're usually really motivated, but sometimes they've got a whole different plan in their head than what you want them to do. So I get them to, before they left that first time after I saw them, and I had already given all my recommendations, I said, what are you going to do this week? Tell me what your plan is. Then I'd have them give me a handshake on it. So you're going to do this the next time I see you. You promise you're going to have that done. Or you're going to be able to do 50 reps of that exercise. And so that's their commitment to the change. So one of my theories on why both of my groups got better, well, it could just be a placebo effect from participating in the study, and they had somebody that they knew they were going to be accountable to, even if I wasn't judging them, or a medical person that was looking at the results and going to tell them you did good or that you did bad. Just having somebody that they knew they were going to have to return to in 6 months. Well,
when you interviewed your people, did you did it in groups or it was individually? Do you think that if you will map them as a group, things would have changed? Because there are a lot of people that do groups, right?
There are, and I think it would change because of different personalities. Some people would be throwing out their ideas a lot, and some people go, oh gosh, that's so different than what I'm thinking, I'm not going to say what I was thinking. Or you might get a lot of agreement, just, oh yeah.
Just to say yes.
Just to say yes.
Well, I'm a diabetes educator and I do groups, and I think it's interesting because they learn from each other. No matter what I say, I don't have diabetes, and they ask that right up front all the time. But if you drink a soda, then we all know that your blood sugar is 300. I don't need to drink a soda now because you've already done that. So they do feed off of each other a lot that way. And so
learn from others.
They learn from others too. Or people who take their insulin and choose not to eat, and then their blood sugar is 50. They learn from that too. What happened? Because I said, so what do you think happened? What did you do that maybe had caused this to occur, and what could you have done differently? And if they can't come up, the other guys are real quick to point out, or if I can't figure out why their sugars are high after lunch, then I say, well, all I had was a salad. They go, you forgot the cobbler you had, but I saw you eating cobbler. Oh yeah, that's right, I had cobbler. And so they kind of police each other too.
So that would be another research question, right? How groups rechange your cognitive mapping just because your peer pressure or education.
Or but adults tend to learn from the experiences of others
Sure.
too. So
Absolutely.
So you can share with everybody. But then by the same token, they all know they're coming back to see you guys. That doesn't change a lot of these people's behavior.
Yeah.
Because I see them, their A1C is 9.5 all the time. All the time. And so, and they know they're coming in every, I try to do it off time. If you see them every 6, I'll see them in between those times that they come to class. Doesn't seem to bother some of them. And I also want to come, I think, your group must have been a little better educated because they realize soda made a difference. I see people out there that have no clue that there's sugar in sodas. I mean, Tuesday in class, 3 guys told me, well, or the man who says, well, he puts like 10 packets of sugar in his tea, but he stirs it and it disappears. Sir, it's still in there. No, it disappears.
Fascinating.
No, it's still sweet. They have very poor concepts of what carbohydrates are, what's in the sodas. They don't like diet sodas because they tried one 15 years ago. Well, you know, things change. 15 years ago.
Yeah. Actually, bachelor's degree was my highest educational level, and about half of them had high school or less.
Most of us here. I'm always amazed how many people didn't graduate from high school here. I had several GEDs or some that get drafted in the 9th and 10th grade.
Right.
And I had a nice distribution on income as well, so, and I didn't find any significant differences on any of those demographic factors.
So
But it is
this
smaller.
school grade, I mean, if the school grades are so low, the education material that you give, are they good enough for they have a school grade of 9 and 10? What are the education materials?
We do a lot, in the class, we do a lot of one-on-one, just talking. I have slides, I have pictures, I have actual food models to show them what, you know, how much sugar is in a regular soda. So there's a lot of visual type things.
And there's one thing I think a written plan for a patient helps a lot. So just by telling them is a different thing, but if you can just if you can pen it down and write a plan for them, they have something to take home with. And they can always, you know, like refer back to the plan, even if they don't remember something during that session when you were talking to them. If they have a piece of paper in their hand, they can always refer to it. And that can be something positive for them because they might follow that or think about that. And especially talking about diabetes, what I do is like, I tell them to take a notebook and write down what all they ate during the whole day. That always helps because sometimes they don't realize, as you said, that the patient had a cobbler and didn't realize that she had it. But when it is on the paper, when and I tell them that before you go to bed, just have a look at your diary and see what you ate. So the next day you will know what you did wrong and you can correct it. You know, you can correct your mistake yourself. And that has worked very well.
So do you involve your patient in your written plans so that?
So when they come to my clinic, I would make a plan for them. Like I would definitely send them to a diabetic education class, to a nutrition consult, and whatever is required for the diabetes. But on the other hand, whatever I talk with them, I would just pen it down. The important points at least. Okay, that you have to make a diary and you have to note it down, or what time to eat what, and what not to eat a lot of carbohydrates, especially at night time, and what time, how frequent you're supposed to eat your meals, how much of water to drink, what foods to avoid. I mean, those kind of big things, which would be very important. And then how much of exercise are you supposed to do, and how often? I mean, just by telling them that, okay, you need to exercise. Okay, I need to exercise. What does exercise mean? How much am I supposed to do? How frequently am I supposed to do? And what if my knees are hurting? What am I supposed to do? I mean, it's easy because sometimes we doctors just go into the rooms and we just keep talking. We have a list of patients to finish. And what we do is, oh, okay, you have diabetes, your hemoglobin A1C is like 10 point something. You need to cut down on your carbohydrates. You need to exercise. You need to do this. And I'll see you in 3 weeks or 3 months. But that doesn't really help. So I think taking some time and then really talking to the patient, because most of the times what I've observed is that patients actually don't know about the disease. And talking about diabetes, they say that, oh, I don't feel anything, why should I do something? Because I'm not having any pain. Okay, my glucose is 300, so what? I don't feel anything. So that is what is important, to make them understand that, okay, once you start feeling something, it'll be too late. So I think those kind of discussions would be very important.
Okay, so the 3 points. Remember the first one?
Make it fun.
Yeah, make it fun. Second one.
Motivational interviewing.
Oh,
Finding out what is important. What is important to the
Yes,
patient.
make sure it's patient directed. And third is to get that commitment before they leave. Last is make sure you follow up and go back to your notes and find out what their concern was that you had them commit to, and see if
Because you're doing it with your parents, oftentimes these older people don't remember any of this. And you can write it down, you tell them, and then I can't have people, they can sit there for 30 minutes and not figure out how to get the insulin out of the vial the entire time, go over and over and over, and they still can't figure it out, they can't remember. So I'm not real sure what to do about those.
There is, Don Royal has done research in diabetics, and the levels of sugar will damage your executive functions. So I think the strategies that we're doing, not only in diabetes, when you deliver new prescriptions, how they're going to follow, will require systems. So we are bringing in our clinic for our nurse visits a family member with the patient. We have figured out that doesn't matter, you can spend hours and hours, and the ability to put together the insulin and measuring it is much more complex than we think. And there is data of that. Diabetes type 2 and don't have that data. That's the reason they don't comply with a lot of things that we do, is they have the inability. So maybe relying more on caregiver. There are many times that we do not prescribe insulin because the patient can overdose them. I mean, those are decisions that are very patient-centered care. If the insulin is going to be the worst thing that you can do for them, even though it's the best alternative in management, you will need to let them go with other meds until you find a reliable caregiver. So it's a very common problem, not only for you, for all of us. And that reason is spending time into what resources the patient has. Can they really follow with all of these pills, and getting systems in place, reminders or the pens. I don't know if you use the pens. We have done better result with the pen.
The VA, it's not people, you have to be blind.
Oh, to get it?
To get
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Well, in the community, at least, we love the pens because we have been able to, even with people that are legally blind, if the pen doesn't get changed, the patient is going to deliver. So that's something that Sharon will fix in pharmacy, promise brands. But, those are the realities of the system. In the community, we still, pens are a great alternative, and there is a lot of smartphones and smart technology that can help to remind patients of things, but
And when they get older, the dexterity of
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to use the syringe and all that.
Horrendous.
We're the only country in the world that uses syringes.
Colombia too, by the way.
Colombia.
Oh yeah, we have tons of countries. It's still cheaper, right? Needles are cheap, but
I
as
think it's all
dirt.
about the cost issue.
It's about cost. So we will probably see
But if
less
they don't get
pens.
the insulin,
But that's a different cost, that comes out of the cost.
Correct.
They don't
and
discuss.
they amputate.
I know that you have a good argument, and people don't see that bottom line yet.
I think it will be a good study to do to see what is the outcome and how much money is spent by not using the pens versus just the syringes, because
They do it. If you talk to Lilly and you talk to GlaxoSmithKline, they have the
they have
data.
the data.
Because when they go to the nursing home, it's cheaper to have the pens than the vial, and that is not even counting errors and contamination in the needles and the ways that you use when you need to discard insulin in hospitals that are not used. So there is data already on that. But again,
To bring it to the
Sharon, is it easy task for Sharon to do
Do
that?
they have a question
I
mark?
tell you,
Is
it's
that why they're
just,
on the
it's drugs in a
screen?
box.
It is. It's unbelievable.
Right, it's like, this is my budget, but there's not kind of the cross-sectional, and that's definitely a challenge. Is that
Yeah.
everybody's thinking of their own budget, but you don't really look at what are the outcomes.
Outcomes and that vital.
And the other associated costs besides the actual drug.
I think that's the driving force associated.
Right, because it's that comes out of somebody else's budget. I
Nobody
think,
else sees that, you don't know, you
Yeah.
don't have those numbers.
Fragmented care.
The last thing is, if you want a copy of this hard copy, and my email address is on here too. I just moved to San Antonio, I've been here a month, so.
Oh,
I'd
congratulations.
love to do some research if you have
Oh,
any
you
interest
will
in
find
doing some
tons of-
research. I'd love to get your information too.
We have research up on A7.
Thank you.
Very much.